Ciao Bella, welcome to Bello Uncinetto. I'm Christina, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today. If you're new, welcome in. If you're returning, welcome back. No matter how long you've been here, I always appreciate your time. We are fast approaching, unfortunately, the end of the Fiber Facts with You podcast series. I tried spacing them out uh, in hopes that I would get some more ideas of things to put in between, but I haven't. So, and that's just not ideas from my head, it's ideas from anyone who wants to share. But I haven't gotten any. So, I have this one, which is about knitting, which we're going to talk about. And then I have two more after that. And then we are finished. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if there's anything else that pops up. Um, However, just to give you a little bit of background, because some people may be new here and may not know what in the world I'm talking about. So I started over a year ago now this podcast series about the fiber arts. I wanted to do like this day in fiber arts history, but trying to piece together like actual dates on a calendar was more difficult than I had time for. So I decided to use like timelines instead. So I have my binder and I have a couple of timelines that I use. So this is one that I use. And then this is another here. This one goes this way. And it is a couple of pages long um, inside of this page protector. So I use both of those and I try to coordinate the timelines because they're a little bit different from each other. Not much, but they are a little bit different. So I try to find a middle ground. And then I have started all the way back into like just talking about what fiber arts is and then going into the different fabrics and the different techniques and the different tools to some degree. So we've now arrived, the last one that I did was weaving. So we've now arrived at knitting. So as I'm talking, right, there's going to be some pictures that are popping up. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. All of the sources that I found on knitting pretty much follow the same timeline. And I've talked about a little bit of this before in the sense that there was a craft that sort of came before knitting and it was called nail binding. And that was something that was found in some of the ancient civilizations. Um, and mainly it's been found in Egypt, so in ancient Egypt. And it was the art of knotting and merging fabrics together. So, and you just used one needle with nail binding, whereas with knitting you use two. So it's sort of, it almost takes me to like that Tunisian crochet area where, because Tunisian crochet uses the hook, but it uses some knitting techniques, but it's not two needles, it's one hook, and it's different things. But nail binding was a series of knots essentially, and merging the fabric together with a series of knots. It wasn't loops and pulling through and all of that like knitting and crochet are. So there were no loops to go through in nail binding. But then we come to uh, the first piece of like actual knitting that's been found, and that was in ancient Egypt with some really interesting socks, right? So you have this white and kind of like indigo color fragment that was found of a knitted socks, and excuse me. So one of the things to talk about with comparing nail binding to knitting is that nail binding actually produces a smoother fabric. Um, but it requires a very special kind of dexterity. I've looked up videos on nail binding, and I don't know that I could do that. I'll put some of the links in the description box below, but I don't think I could do that, right? So we go to Egypt, right, where we have these knitted socks, and then from there, there's sort of this jump from different places, right? So you have it's taken to Spain, and then it's taken into Europe, and it's taken to all these places, mainly through the church, right? So the Arabs take it to Spain, and then Spain, being a Catholic nation, right, they take it through the church to other places that they conquer, other places that they trade with. And there are some paintings that show up, and they're called the knitted Madonnas. And there are several of them, but these works of art were done to show. I mean, this is like, we're talking about like the 13th century, right? And this is showing how far back knitting actually goes, that they have the Madonnas knitting during this time. And then in the 14th century, we have it finally reaching Europe. Um, and there were guilds established, and tests were given to see how well people could craft, how highly skilled they were in knitting. And in the 16th century, we have the purl stitch method, which is what is used a lot today, like the knit purl method was started in the 16th century by English knitters. And these stockings, these socks, were so popular that even King Henry VIII had them made for him. And then his daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, took it a step further, right? Um, by encouraging the knitting guilds in England. And not only did she wear the knitted stockings, but she also had sleeves knitted for a lot of her dresses. And in a lot of the pictures, you can see sort of this intricate work on her arms, and some of that is knitted fabric. Then you have this one particular knitting style that developed in the British Isles, and it was called a Gainsey. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Or, oh no, hopefully, I'm not pronouncing that incorrectly. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then you come across the Fair Isle knitting, which was done in the Shetland Islands. And that was, um, who was it? Oh yes, it was a Spaniard. Admiral Juan Gomez de Medina was shipwrecked in the Shetland Islands, and he taught those islanders how to knit, and then we got Fair Isle knitting. So then we go into um, this idea of, we've had the guilds, we've had these tests that have been created for how well people can knit, and we get into the trade routes and the Industrial Revolution, and you start getting these machines, right? So William Lee developed the first knitting machine. It was called a stocking frame, and this was in 1589. And the first one that he had 8 needles to the inch, and then it was developed into the 20 needles per inch. And from that, as we know, right, we get it grows into these big circular knitting machines. They were gigantic. And then we get more into later, right? We get into some of the home knitting machines like the Addy and the Centro and things like that. Those come later, but that's kind of where that foundation started, right? So then we move into uh, fabrics for um, troops and things like that. And then in the 1920s, it explodes into fashion, and people like Coco Chanel are marketing these fabrics as, the cream of the crop, things, most fashionable things to wear. You see them all over with these unique styles. But then the Great Depression hits. And while knitted fabrics are so nice, patterns become more popular because it's cheaper to get the yarn and knit your own than it is to buy something that's already made. So there's an explosion of these patterns. Unfortunately, we swing back the other way in the 1950s because you get some of the synthetic fibers that are made, and that makes it much easier for machines to crank out all of these fabrics. And so here is where in the 1950s is where we see knitting become these two distinct levels, right? You have um, the industrial side of knitting where it's like this clothing, this trade, all of that, but that's now done almost exclusively by machines. Whereas knitting by hand becomes more of a hobby and less of a craft, a trade, an art. It starts to make that distinction really, really clear in the 1950s. That's not to say that people don't still do it and still sell their items. People still sell their items today, but you get this big gap between the mass produced items that are made on these machines that have just been perfected and redrafted, and now they make things that look almost hand knitted, right? To where you get the knitting by hand becoming more of a hobby and not the trade. So that's a little bit more difficult for people to take in, especially people that had been doing it as a trade for so long, because to my knowledge, right, there has not been a machine that's been made that will imitate crochet, but knitting, right, has been imitated by machines for a really long time. So um, it's difficult for those people, right, to see such that gap grow so much. Now we're seeing not so much a swing back into more handmade items, but more of an appreciation for handmade items. Not that people are necessarily willing to spend the money that you would need for a handmade item, but they are actually appreciating the handmade items, and that comes through the internet and social media and celebrities showing themselves doing the craft, buying yarn, um, wearing things that they've actually made. And that has kind of encouraged some people to not, I mean, some people to start, yes, of course, but then some people who were doing it to be like, well, if Julia Roberts does it, right, then I must be doing something amazing because she does it. If Dakota Fanning does it, if um, there was another one on here, Kate Middleton. If Kate Middleton knits, right, then it must be growing more in popularity. So people who would do it just for peace of mind in their own homes now feel more of a sense of pride in their makes. And that, I'm not speaking for all people. Please understand. I'm just saying that that gap has sort of lessened a little, where there's more respect for handmade items, and some of the machine items are kind of looked down on, which, good, bad, right, wrong, I don't know. But I don't know how to knit yet. I will learn eventually. I do know how to crochet, and I know how long it takes to make a crocheted item. And from what I understand, knitting takes even longer. And I can Tunisian crochet, which is kind of in between. the time with crochet and knitting. And sometimes Tunisian crochet takes a crazy amount of time. So I can only imagine what knitting takes. And right now I don't have that patience, right? I have too many things going on in my life. I have a child that I'm raising, another child who, while they are an adult, they still need help. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not complaining at all. I'm there for my children, but I don't want to learn a new skill right now because of all of that. So, um, with all of these things, unfortunately, um, right, we have this big discrepancy. And it's happened in crochet as well, where you have not necessarily machines, but you have people who are being taken advantage of, and they're um, making pennies on the dollar, and they're selling crochet items in stores for really, really cheap, and then people aren't wanting to buy the handmade crochet items because they're like, oh, well, I can get this at such and such for this price. Well, go get it then, right? But sadly, the person who made that is not making what that item is worth. So yes, you're getting a discount, but the person who made it is getting pennies for their efforts, right? There aren't too many fair trade companies that are giving people that made the item what they actually should be paid for that item. So, starting to lose my voice again, you guys. Oh my goodness, I have to be careful. Okay, so that concludes my history of knitting for this episode. I hope that you have enjoyed it. Please let me know if there's anything else that you have that you think that I should do. I have, let's see, what do I have coming up? So, yeah, as of right now, I have crochet and amigurumi. Those are the two that I have. I could add um, Tunisian crochet in here. That could be something that I add. I haven't yet, but let me know what you think. Should I add Tunisian crochet to the list? Should I put it before regular crochet? Should I put it after regular crochet? Anything else that you can think of that you might want to know about the history of fiber arts, please take a look through the rest of the things that I have for this series. And if there's anything, even if it kind of would have gone back in the timeline, I'm happy to still do a video on it and just say this was a suggestion by a subscriber. No, I'm not doing it in the order of the timeline, but I'm still sharing because this is something they wanted to learn about. Okay, so I welcome your comments and any information that you have about knitting. Let me know, right? I am not a knitter in the least. Definitely not an expert knitter because I'm not a knitter in the first place. So I welcome any knowledge that you have, anything that you would like to share. And until I see you again, be well, be safe, and be the change you wish to see in the world, everyone. Ciao bella!